Welcome to the Sweet Life Coaching Podcast, connecting real people with expert advice to achieve a healthier lifestyle and live a more fulfilling and abundant life. Here is your host, Coach Tavia.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Sweet Life Coaching Podcast. I am your host, Coach Tavia. How's everybody doing today? I'm super excited today to bring on another fabulous friend, a fabulous guest of mine. And please, what a warm welcome for Mr. Ryan Syverson, right?
Syverson.
Sorry, dang it. I hate it when I butcher names. Sorry. Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Tavia. Thanks for having me. Super excited and happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited too. So just a little bit about Ryan. So reason why I brought him on, not only is he a great friend of mine, but he also is a survivor of Lyme disease. He's the owner of and head coach of SubLyme Life. He works with clients in group and one-on-one settings. He has actually received his training in functional diagnostic nutrition, FDN, and he holds certification in advanced certified personal trainer. He's currently pursuing a certification through the Wellness Code Academy to further his understanding of healing through the mind and body. But most importantly, he had a big journey, 7-year journey of fighting Lyme disease and mold. And he spent the last 5 years of his life using his personal and professional experience to help clients overcome chronic illness like Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, when it seems like they had nothing else left, when everything else has failed. Is that correct, Ryan? Is that in a nutshell?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. So let's get right to it. So you had Lyme 7 years ago. You were diagnosed.
I was diagnosed actually longer ago than that now. So I've been in remission for about a little over 4 years. But yeah, I didn't get the official diagnosis until 2013, but I started getting sick in 2010.
Okay, 2010. Okay, gotcha. So take me back. So, those who are listening right now may or may not know my journey. And I did speak out on my first podcast about my journey. So if you haven't heard my first podcast, if you're listening out there, go back and listen to that. I do talk about Lyme, but this isn't about me today. This is about Ryan's journey. And so those of you who are listening right now don't know what Lyme is. Can you just give a brief synopsis of what Lyme disease is?
Yeah, so Lyme disease is an intracellular. Well, it's actually, it can morph into 3 different things. It could be an intracellular infection, it can be a spirochete, or it can be a cyst. And it's highly adaptable and evades the immune system, and it can really shut down the immune system. And usually when you say Lyme, it's a cocktail of things that come with it. So you could have the Lyme bacteria, which is actually Borrelia burgdorferi, but then you could also have other intracellular infections, be it Babesia, Bartonella, Anaplasma, Mycoplasma pneumonia, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus. You're just a cocktail of different illnesses coming. And, it's believed because these microbes can lower the immune system, it just makes you more susceptible to these infections. And a lot of the times we have these infections in us already. They live symbiotically with us. And if our immune system's strong, they just keep them in check. But when they get knocked down, these things kind of come out and play. And so, yeah, you get the cocktail of all these different infections. Then you can throw in other things too, like mold illness is really common with people that are dealing with Lyme disease as well. And I think that's a big problem for people trying to overcome Lyme because they don't really address the mold factor, and that can really just put the screeching halt on any kind of progress that you have with your Lyme disease progress. And then Lyme is the great imitator. People get diagnosed with MS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, even things like ALS, Parkinson's, all these other diseases could actually be the root cause, could be something like Lyme disease. So I think it's more prevalent than, they would like us to believe. And it's something that it's kind of sweeping the world right now, actually.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for that synopsis. And and I agree. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And unfortunately, like you, or like me, I was misdiagnosed for like 10 years. Did that happen for you too?
Yeah. So for me, Yeah, for me, I think, growing up in Minnesota, I was always outside playing in the woods. I got bit by ticks and stuff like that. And I was a really sickly young child. I had a lot of allergies and stuff like that. So I think maybe I've had Lyme since I was a kid, but I really don't know because I don't remember ever getting a bullseye rash or anything like that. And I think they say only like 30% of people actually see the rash.
Yeah.
But I was fine through my 20s. And then when I hit like 30, I started having nagging injuries and just kept getting injured. And I was an athlete, played competitive ice hockey my entire life and played until I was 35. But it was just injury after injury and tired and I just kind of being run down. And looking back now, I think that the Lyme was just not as prevalent. It wasn't really causing an issue. But it wasn't until about 2010 is when the wheels really kind of fell off the wagon. I started experiencing insomnia, like joint pain. Like I'd wake up in the morning and it literally took me like a half hour, 40 minutes to get out of bed in the morning because I felt like I was like a 95-year-old man. Like, I was like the Tin Man. I needed to lube up my joints. I had to pop ibuprofen like 2,000 milligrams in the morning just to be able to move. I couldn't function without coffee, so I was dealing with fatigue, body pain, you name it. I had major brain fog and just couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went, like most people that are dealing with things like this, went from doctor to doctor. I think I ended up seeing like 15 different doctors and specialists. Even like functional medicine practitioners. Nobody ever could really tell me what it was. And some people had mentioned Lyme, but I was kind of in denial and I didn't want to accept that. And then it wasn't until I saw a doctor of osteopathy who's like, I think you have Lyme disease. And sure enough, he ran an IGeneX lab on me and came back positive, both IgG and IgM. And that was kind of like the eye-opening thing. But, I had mold issues that kind of really triggered it all. And I can share that with you in a bit, or if you'd like me to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, it's interesting because your story is very similar to mine. I was diagnosed in 2015, 10 years earlier than that, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, joint pain, headaches, migraines. I just, I did the same. In my 20s, I was a dancer my whole life. I was a gymnast. I was a volleyball player. I danced well into my 30s. I coached everything. And then I started I kept getting sick and I kept getting, something would come up, then it was like, oh, my gallbladder hurt. And then, it was just like one thing after another. And I kept going back to the doctor, So I really want to emphasize that if you are listening right now, and if you can kind of resonate with this of, oh my gosh, I'm going to the doctor all the time too, and I can't figure this out. This might be your chance to go talk and ask someone about Lyme disease. But that being said, let's go back to the mold thing. So tell me so a lot of times with Lyme, a lot of things will overlap with it, right? And a lot of things will hide Lyme, if you will. And so tell me about this mold thing, because a lot of times, I had sinusitis problems a lot. And I kept going back. They give me antibiotics. I know you have chronic sinusitis. You have sinus infection, blah, blah, blah. But what really was going on later on, I found out I had mold too. It's like, what? So tell me about this mold thing with you. How did that come about?
So the mold thing, I didn't really know anything about it at first when I first got sick. Like I said, back in 2010, that's, when the wheels started falling off the wagon. At that time, I was personal training on the side as well as working a 40-hour week work job. So I was kind of moonlighting as a trainer. And I've always been into lifting weights and everything like that. And I started tearing muscles like I've never had that happen before. Again, the pain, like the insomnia, all this. I started getting crazy sores on my mouth, almost like thrush. And, I go to the doctor and they just kind of wrote it off. And but in Chicago, where I live, during the housing boom in the early 2000s, they were throwing up these buildings really quick, and they made these condos. The three flats were built out of cinder block. They call it split face block, and it kind of gives us this rustic look. But if you're familiar with cinder block, it's super porous, and when it rains, it just soaks up the water like a sponge. Well, they were throwing these things up so quickly, and none of the contractors were sealing it. And they didn't tell anybody that we needed to seal it. So my building was just absorbing water. And so over time, mold started to develop, and I didn't realize it at first. So I was really sick, and I was a very social person, out playing hockey and then going out to bars with friends and doing all this. And I just couldn't do I'm like, you know what? I'm sick. I'm tired. I'm just going to stay home. And unbeknownst to me, the more I stayed home, the more I got sick. And this went on for like a year. And I just went to all kinds of different doctors, couldn't figure it out. Again, they told me I had fibromyalgia. And it wasn't until I went away to California for a week to visit my friend, and I started feeling better when I was gone. And I made a comment to my brother, like on the phone when we're coming back. He's like, jokingly, he's like, well, maybe your house is making you sick. And that was like a light went on for me. And I'm like, I'm going to start looking into this. And so when I got back,
right,
I ended up having, I had my building tested for mold. And while I was away back in Minnesota with my family, I got a call from the mold inspector, and he had the results back, and he said, you need to get out of your house right now. Do not move back into it because you have the level of Stachybotrys and other black and toxic mold in there.
Whoa.
Could cause major issues. And I was like, oh, it was awful, but it was finally like, okay, I have some validity that there's something going on here, because I'm around my house sniffing like outlets because I thought because I could smell mold. My family and friends thought I was crazy, but I finally figured out what it was.
Yeah, that's insane. So yeah, I mean, and most people don't think that route, So you really smelled mold in your outlets?
Yeah, I'm like right now, even to this day, I'm like a canary in a coal mine. If I go in and I get like that musty smell or whatever, I instantly trigger, and it's like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. So I smelled it, even though nobody else smelled it. They thought I was crazy. I just think I was hypersensitive to it. And thankfully I was.
Well, and I will say too, a lot of us Lymies, we call ourselves, like we are a little bit more hypersensitive to chemicals, scents, smells, things like that too. In general, I notice that, with me as well. Like I don't do perfumes. I do scent free everything.
Yep.
Just, I can't do it. It's just like, but, okay. So here we are. So we have Lyme, and then you had the Lyme diagnosis, then we have mold on top of that.
Yeah. Well, actually for me, it came first was the mold. I found out I had the mold.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause that was probably 2011, late 2011. And then when I moved out of the mold, then I ended up having to, leave my home because I remediated it. I spent $20,000 remediating it.
Hey.
And in the process, the remediation company said, we need to stop because the unit below you been vacant for 5 years due to a foreclosure because the unit owner there passed away. The bank never did anything with it. And so that unit was covered in mold as well. And so the remediation company said, well, we could move forward with your unit, but you'll have mold back in your unit within, 2 to 3 months. So what do you want to do?
Whoa.
And it was at that point, I'm like, all right, I was like, I need to make a decision here. So I chose my health over my credit score and, my home and stuff like that. And I just moved out, and I started feeling better for a little bit, but then that's when all this initiated the Lyme. And that's when I started things after getting out of the mold. I felt better for a little bit, and then the Lyme kicked in, and I was chasing. It took me another 1.5 years to get the diagnosis for mold Lyme beyond that.
Wow. So, excuse me, I want to talk about the Lyme diagnosis. And because you mentioned CDC positive, IgG, IgM.
Actually, it was IGeneX.
I'm sorry. You took the test for IGeneX, which is where I took my test too. And that's where I confirmed that I had Lyme. And were you CDC positive, you said?
I wasn't CDC positive because I only had three bands that were IgG, IgM. But I honestly went to my doctor and other doctors, and they refused to even run a Lyme panel on me.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I want to talk about that Lyme test too, because that's something really important that people don't understand. Like even me, I was going to doctor after doctor, and they're like, he's like, I'm sure we want a Lyme test. And I've had my clients say that too. Oh, I'm sure my doctor's testing me for Lyme. It's not a standard test, guys, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a standard test. So IGeneX is like pretty much like I would say the Bentleys of like the Lyme test, if you will, in the United States. So it's a blood test, just so people understand. So you went and got the IGeneX test, and it was, which doctor finally ran the test for you? It was
a DO ran it for me. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So he ran the test for you, and it took did yours take like 3 weeks? I think mine took like 3 weeks. Yeah. Like 3 weeks. I remember him calling. He's like, hey, I got good news for you. And I'm like, what? He's like, you have Lyme disease. And I'm like, great.
I don't know if that's good news. But,
right.
But when you're searching for an answer for so long, it was, because then I knew what I was up against and what I needed to do. So it was good news.
Yeah, no, for me as well. I got mine on my birthday. He called it.
Oh, wow.
Good news or bad news? I'm like, it's my birthday today. He's like, oh, well, happy birthday. You have Lyme. So you get Lyme. So I want to talk about this test because this is a big deal too. Mm-hmm. People get Lyme tests all the time. There's the ELISA, there's the Western blot, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a test that doesn't show the bands, if you will, or the strains of Lyme. And that's a big thing. And so you said you had 3 bands positive?
Yep.
You had 3 bands. Okay. And how many bands are there? I can't even remember.
I want to say like 7, maybe 5 or 7. I know for CDC positive, you have to have 5 bands.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that. So maybe you can touch on that before I do. But so tell people about the bands a little bit and what that means.
Right. So these bands, like the thing with Lyme disease, it's hard to come up with a positive test because we're not developing antibodies to it, because the Lyme bacteria is a super stealth bacteria and it constantly is morphing and changing its outer surface protein, which is what our immune system would identify and create antigens for. So if it's constantly changing its outer surface protein, we're not going to have the antibodies to it. Right. And so, and then there's things like Epstein-Barr that can trigger one of the bands as well. So unless you've done specific antibiotics for Lyme disease or done some other things, you might not have antibodies to it. And so when you run these tests, you might not come up positive. And something like a LabCorp or a Quest, just doing a Lyme panel through them is definitely not going to pick it up.
Nope.
Well, I shouldn't say definitely. There are some people that get picked up, but those are the ones that are, full-blown Lyme CDC positive, but they're not as sensitive as something like as an IGeneX or like an Armin Labs or something like that. Right.
Yeah. So, yes. So to piggyback on that, so to make that a little bit more clear. So when anybody's listening out there right now and you're like, well, I had a Lyme test and it came back negative. So does that mean they're negative?
Nope. It definitely, especially if you're doing it through LabCorp or Quest. Because again, I came back positive from IGeneX, but I've run multiple LabCorp panels on Lyme and none of them ever came back positive for Lyme.
Interesting.
And even an IGeneX could come back false, which is why you got to really look at, a lot of times it's a clinical diagnosis based on your symptoms. Mm-hmm. And so you just, you got to kind of weigh the two together and go from there.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about you a little bit in your journey. So here you are, you have Lyme and you said you're about 3 years into remission. One thing I want to point out with Lyme is it never goes away. Right.
Yep.
We put it in remission, just like cancer. It can come back. Those little dang spiral sheets, they burrow in your their bones. Even they can burrow in your tissue. They can hide out somewhere. They hide. Lyme hides. I want to point that out. So what are you? Okay. So now you become this health coach. You took your mess into your message, like I did. Mm-hmm. And let's fast forward here. And so how are you helping others with Lyme? Are you specifically just helping Lyme or you do other chronic illness too?
No, I do Lyme, mold illness, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. So they're kind of all, a lot of times have a lot of similar underlying root causes. So I work with all of them. But yeah, it's, 7-year journey of really figuring out what worked for me. And, I tried a lot of things that didn't work. And basically I collected all my experience and all that stuff and made it into a program that I can help clients, and I help them navigate and provide that coaching and an accountability and like transformational coaching that they need, that really helped myself and really helps my clients. Because I see that, it's an office, like the mindset portion, almost like life coaching within the health coaching space, to really help them open up possibilities and tap into the mindset, our nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and how that really affects your health and wellness and ability to overcome a chronic health challenge.
Right. And I love what you said. Let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute about the mindset thing. So I know for me, it was when I took a stance and said, I am not Lyme. I am not this disease, is when things started shifting for me. And that's when I became searching for going back to school. And I was like, I got to do something with this terrible disease. And I turned it into, my message to my message. And you're doing the same. So here you are today, you're coaching people, loving life a lot better, feeling a lot better, but the mindset thing, right? That's hard. You can't just be like, oh, I don't have Lyme anymore, I'm better, right? You can't just say, I don't have cancer anymore, I'm not better. But there is a pivotal moment that when people actually take the time and take a moment and be like, I want to go somewhere else in my life, that's when the shift happens, right? And that's what you coach on, and I coach on as well, is that mindset shift and how it is important. So tell me a little bit more about your mindset and what you had to do to get there, to transfer from being sick to being well.
Yeah. So for me, it was, I was doing I've always been, athletic and exercising and, eating and stuff was important to me. So that stuff was easy. But going through the protocols and addressing the specific infections with like herbs and stuff like that worked. But I hit a plateau at like 80% or 75%. And I was there for probably 2 or 3 years and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And, they say, you get that aha moment, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And I ended up reading a book when they talked about like mental, emotional, stuck emotions, trauma, and like your mindset as being a big block of overcoming Lyme disease. And I'd had people tell me that for years. And I'm like, it's not in my head. It's not in my head. And they weren't saying it's in my head, but if you do the inner work and like personal development and mindset and like kind of life coaching aspects, that's when really things changed for me. Cause I also had a time, I started to try to go dating, and I'd met a girl I really liked, and she ended up, calling off for me, and I couldn't figure out why. And she was, bold enough to tell me why. And she's like, you just talk about being sick or your illness too much.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that was like, my mind blew up. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was focusing on it so much. And where our focus goes, energy flows. And if you're going to focus on that, it keeps going. And so I just started digging into personal development. I got into, Bob Proctor and Kevin Trudeau, and went to other, personal development type stuff. And as I started to work on my mind, really cultivating gratitude and affirmations and all that, I catapulted. I went from 70% to like 85% in a matter of like 4 to 5 months. And it just kept going and kept going. And now it's a major factor for me in living the life that I live now.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, no, it's a big deal. What the mind believes, the body achieves.
Yes. I love that.
There was that saying too, and what was it? Where the energy flows,
where your focus goes, the energy flows.
Energy flows. Yeah, totally. So, to listeners out there, and it's like someone's laying down in their bed right now listening to this, and they're like, I have Lyme disease. It sucks. I don't feel good. Or maybe you have fibromyalgia. Maybe you have something else going on, whatever.
Yep.
They're like, that's a bunch of horse hockey. Say the word hockey because you play hockey. But that's a bunch of horse hockey, like I'm doing all the supplements, I'm doing all the things, and I'm not getting success. Well, true. And we respect and honor that because we've been there too. And like you said, and the other thing I wanted to point out is you were talking about, I was doing the supplements and I got to about 80%. And I will say this too, even 80% is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good, recovery or whatever. But, if you're out there and you're like, shoot, what are you telling me? Like, what are you saying? I just need to say, oh, I want to be better. I'm going to be better. And no, that's not what we're saying. But there's some inner work. There's inner work that has to be done. And emotions are tied to your organs. Trauma is tied inside. So for me, I wanted to share this really quick, is that for me, my Lyme came out like you. I don't know if it did. Mine came out when a trauma happened. Like it had been sitting there festering for a while. But mine came out like I had a traumatic event happen. And then and then they said it was EBV flaring because I got EBV or mono, AKA mono, back when I was in college. And then, so they're like, oh, you're just having a relapse of mono. I'm like, what? Mono again? What? That's how mine manifested. Anyways, so just to kind of make this full circle here, but the mindset shift will come. And you have to focus on the healing. You have to focus on the inner healing. It's the complete package. And that's what we do as coaches, right? We coach on that because we've lived it. We know it. We love it. We don't love it. we learned. And so now we pass that on to our clients, right? All of that. and help them realize the potential that they can have by shifting their mindset and including that with their protocol of what other supplements or whatever doctor is telling them to do. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. So tell me a little bit more, just kind of wrapping this all together. So here we are, you have Lyme, you had mold, you had EBV, or told you had fibromyalgia. Then you turned your mess into your message, became a functional nutritional practitioner, coach, and did all the coaching. Where are you at now, Ryan? Where are you at right now in your life?
I'm thriving now. Like I say this often, like I'm 45 now, but I honestly feel healthier and better than I did when I was 30 before I got sick. And, I like to look at Lyme as like, it was like a blessing in disguise because it really kind of shed a light on me. It helped me find my purpose and my path. One of my practitioners said, Lyme disease is like having a co-pilot. So whenever I'm, not living in alignment and on my path, like if I start, not focusing on stress reduction, or I start eating outside of the foods that I should be eating, or not getting enough sleep, like I'll have some symptoms kind of creep up, and it's like, hey, all right, I need to get back on path. And so I look at that, but it also helped me find that helped me do that inner work to help me overcome stuck emotions and traumas and things that I've dealt with, which not only helped me overcome the Lyme disease and put it in remission and have a thriving and abundant, happy life, but it's also helped me in my business and all these other things to do that, because doing this inner work and overcoming something like Lyme disease is just an indication that you can overcome anything. And it's just, it takes the time doing the work and being consistent. And when you can overcome something like this, you can overcome or achieve anything.
I love it. Thank you. That's awesome. What would you say to someone listening to this right now, and it's like, I don't know if I have Lyme, but I've been sick, and I'm just like, I'm scared. I don't know. Maybe I have Lyme, maybe I don't, and maybe I don't know if I want to get that diagnosis. It's you guys are kind of scaring me. Like, what would you say to someone that's kind of scared right now and on the fence about, don't want to know if I should get a diagnosis? Maybe I have Lyme, maybe I don't. What would you say?
In regards to the scary thing, it's like, stepping into your discomfort, and that's something, like I said, I was in denial about Lyme when people were saying it. But then when I finally got the diagnosis, it was like now I know what I'm facing. And just as humans, we always want to know what we're facing. So if you're someone that's stuck and you've been doing the cycle of trial and error and going to doctors and just keep getting told that it's in your head or whatever, and you can't quite figure it out, never stop digging, never stop trying. The conventional medicine model is great for acute illnesses and stuff like that. We have some great things, but when it comes to chronic illness, it's not always the best way to go. And you just have to keep digging and look for somebody that practices functional medicine, who's been down these things, down this path. And that can help you, shine some light on what dysfunctions you might have be going on. Is it Lyme disease? Is it mold? Is it gut dysfunction? Like, all these things can lead to those symptoms that you're having. And quite honestly, if you've been through some sort of trauma, the trauma throws off our autonomic nervous system, and then that can throw off all our organs. And so just getting addressing those traumas and then supporting the body to get back to the way you want, you can start overcoming and having more energy and getting back to a more normal and fulfilling life.
I love it. And there's people out there that will help, like
yes.
you and me.
Yeah, there's people like both of us that can help you. You can reach out to either one of us. We can, and if we can't help, we definitely have a large resource of people that can.
So many other functional nutritional practitioners and doctors and MDs too that can have connections. Absolutely. Yeah. So awesome. Any last final words? If someone wants to contact you, Ryan, about your journey, and if you are listening to this and you resonate with Ryan and you have some questions about the mold, anything fibromyalgia, his journey, or how he can help you, how can people contact you?
Yeah, so you can find me. So I'm active on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Syverson R. So that's at SYV as in Victor, ERSONR. Or you can look me up on my website at www.YourSubLyme Life, and SubLyme is SUBLYME life.com. And those are I'm just active on Instagram. That's the only social media platform I'm on.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you for being on my show today. And thank you for all your knowledge and sharing your experience. I really appreciate it so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. Everybody have an amazing day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Sweet Life Coaching Podcast. To learn more about the topics mentioned on today's show, please visit sweetcoachtavia.com.